I'm Tara. I'm the community manager and artist partnerships at Backline, for those that don't know me. We also have Pooja here. She is Backline's clinical outreach representative. So we're here representing Backline. As most of you know, Backline is a resource hub for the music industry, and we aim to provide the industry with as many tools and resources as possible to support their mental health and well-being. And we recognize that touring is such an important part of the industry. We've been hosting these monthly touring workshops with Love for Live for quite some time now, and we're really excited for this one today, which is all about burnout. As with all Backline programs, participation is encouraged. It's not required. Whatever your comfort level is, we'll meet you where you're at. Feel free, if you do have questions, throw them in the chat. Pooja and I will kind of filter that through and answer when possible. So today we're going to talk about burnout and on and off the road, and we have some very special guests with us. The facilitators for today's session are seasoned musicians, touring members, and clinical providers. They're going to speak on their experience and how to prevent burnout, share tips on what to do when you're in it, how to recover from burnout, and a lot more. So today we have with us co-founder, vocalist, and mandolinist Paul Hoffman of Green Sky Bluegrass, musician and lead vocalist for many musical projects, including Joe Russo's Almost Dead and Ghostlight, Tom Hamilton, and growth mindset and productivity coach for music industry professionals, and the founder of the Rockstar Advocate, which helps people reach their goals with custom goal setting and time management solutions. Suzanne Paulinksi, thank you all for joining us today and for talking about burnout with us. I don't know about y'all, but I've been hearing a lot about burnout. I've been seeing a lot of content on social media about burnout lately. I've definitely experienced it, whether or not I was even aware. And it seems that especially around this time of year, folks are really struggling with burnout, the emotional, the physical, mental exhaustion that can result from stress. Paul, I'd love to start with you since you've been touring for quite a long time. How do you recognize when you need a change of pace?
I didn't know that I needed a change of pace until I stayed home for a year and a half. You know, I think for a lot of musicians I know, like, we didn't realize the snowball that we were in. And it's like, it's so much easier to just chase the next gig when it's just an endless string of gigs. Suddenly I was home. I have a 3-year-old now. And I feel my priorities shifting. I love touring. I love playing music. I love being in a bus, playing Nintendo and eating pizza at 3 a.m. with my friends. But there's like, I've gotten to this point where I feel like there's so much life things that I just want to do. I want to go camping. I want to just like stay home and go to a movie on a Friday night. I don't know. Like I've been touring so long and my 3-year-old has a huge impact on that. Like I want to be home with her and I want to do things with my family. So we've sort of, in general, we've had to structure our touring down a little bit because we're playing bigger venues. So I just have to try and recognize those times when I need time at home or with my family and speak up, and my band and whole organization is really accommodating for that. There's another father in my band, so we all kind of just defer to what we need. If someone needs to go play another show over a Green Sky show or go on a family vacation for their parents' 50th anniversary or something, like we're more likely to pass on what could be like a pacemaker gig that we need to take. And I think that's scary because we work in an industry that feels like it's volatile. Like if you go away for 6 months, will your fans still like you? If you don't take that big gig in, Florida, will you ever be able to sell tickets there again? So it's like, and I mentioned that when we were just kind of chasing one gig after another, when you're trying to create this career for yourself, I'm in a lucky place that we have established a precedent and a fan base that I feel confident we could go away for a whole year and it'd be fine. But 6 years ago, I wouldn't have said that. 10 years ago, I definitely wouldn't have said that. I made a lot of sacrifices for family and my own personal relationships to just like chase the dream. And it's hard to know when it's safe to make space for yourself and your own needs and not just be chasing the dream.
That really resonates with me as an artist myself, of just knowing it's safe to make space for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Does any of that resonate with you as a touring artist as well?
Mute.
I think the pandemic being the big eye opener, like Paul said, when you're in it, you don't realize
Mm-hmm.
just how deep in it you are. And we're all coming at this from a pretty big point of privilege, though, Paul and I particularly, we're both in bands that are successful, and we're able to make a living. But that's not what a lot of people can do, so being able to pick and choose in itself is like like Paul said, I mean, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I was a plumber, 10 years ago, I was a plumber. And what I did for fun was go on tour and play music with my friends and do the thing, so yeah, I'm certainly aware of it now, and try to be kinder to myself, I guess, about it. But at the same time, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe it's an addiction, I mean, I'm certainly not a great person with moderation. And maybe that's just a thing for dudes or people like myself that just kind of need to be hyper focused on something, it's a balancing act, right? You're saying you're an artist too, right? So I'm sure you get tunnel vision, and it's like, I don't really care about anything that is outside of this thing. I got a scent, and I'm gonna go after it, and and my process has definitely changed a bit, creatively, because now I know what I'm doing.
Mm.
And I still do it, so I have to grapple with that reality, but that's how, that's the process, and that's what kind of needs to happen. And I have to weigh, can I emotionally deal with what has to happen for me to make an album right now? Like during COVID, I wrote dozens of songs. Like I just have like this huge list of things, and so many of them were dealing with things that I just couldn't. I knew I couldn't deal with them, and I think that's just like that's like the dance now, is knowing, okay, I'm gonna burn it at both ends, but I have to wait for the timing to light them,
Yeah.
Do you feel like creativity flows more in the low energy moments or those high energy moments for you?
I think they both serve a purpose. Like the perspective of having those the ebb and flow. The low makes you appreciate the high, and the high vice versa. So yeah, I mean, I certainly get something creatively out of both ends of it. And yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's the price of admission. Or what I've told myself, I'm not saying, this is a blanket statement, but for myself, it's the price of admission. This is the job. If I wanted something less stressful or less time consuming, I could have just stayed a plumber, or gone to school, or done a myriad of other things. For me, the whole process, the good and the bad of it, it's great, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, like it's the thing, because you start getting something going, you start getting it sizzling, you get an idea, and you're just like, oh, dude, I think this might be and you don't want to talk about it, you let it simmer a little more, and all of a sudden, and then you just getting super excited inside, and it's all bubbling up. It's like when you pick up a leash and the dog, looks at you, like the ear turns. That's what it's like, and it gets to the point where my everything about myself is just like, okay, if the dog knows, if you pick up the leash and he puts his shoes on, we're definitely going for a walk. Right. That's kind of like what happens in here, where it's like, okay, this idea is pretty cool, and then I keep chasing a little bit, and then if the idea puts its shoes on, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do whatever has to happen for the next week to month, and whether that's I'm gonna live at the studio and not sleep, or I'm gonna, whatever the things are, I just have to tape up the windows. It's gonna be a hurricane, and let it happen,
I would like to know how, and Wendy, you actually, I see in the chat, you asked the next question I was going to ask, which is Paul and Tom. Maybe Paul, we start with you. How do you recognize burnout when you're on the road? Are you aware of it as soon as it comes on at this point, since you've been touring for quite a while, or is it something that just catches up?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's kind of there all the time. I feel like I simultaneously find myself really excited daily to be out, and also uninspired. I find, and I go through it in a cycle every week too. I'm realizing more and more, it's like we take 2 or 3 days off at the end of the week, and then the first day of the week's always hard again. It feels like this common trope of a Monday syndrome for me. I should be rested for that first show, but I'm just kind of struggling to write a set list. Don't feel like changing my strings, rather lay around than exercise. Not communicating well with my bandmates. There's a lot of facets to being on tour, to navigate the relationships, the traveling, the lack of sleep, too much sleep, too many carbs. It's like, I later in the week, or as the shows progress, I find that every week I sort of climb up to this heightened state of manic performance or something, and just often I find too, it's really hard to navigate, because days when I'm feeling uninspired to play a show and kind of dragging around and don't want to write a set list, I find that I get on stage and I'm in a mental place where I'm not overthinking it. I'm not trying really hard to perform, and I play great because I'm detached from it in a way that's awesome. On the Friday night when I care so much about rocking real hard and writing a real banger set list, I get up there and flub. On Tuesday when I'm like, man, I'd rather just watch Stranger Things in the bus in my sweatpants, then I get up there and I play with great clarity. And then that's instantly really rewarding for me. I'm like, wow, playing really good. And a half hour goes by and I realize I haven't even looked at anyone in the crowd. I'm so I don't know if I answered the question. I don't think I can. I think the answer is that it's always there. And I always have to do things for myself to try and, find whatever kind of focus I need, or the passion and that spark, I guess. I go for walks, take naps.
I gotta say that's so refreshing to hear you talk about how some days on the road you're uninspired, because that completely resonates with me as a touring artist myself. And it's definitely, I think in the past I wouldn't have recognized that as feeling burned out. But now, understanding, the more that I learn about what burnout actually is, it's realizing oh, okay, that's what I'm experiencing at the moment. Tommy, how do you recognize burnout while you're on the road? And if so, what do you do for self-care? Do you also take walks or nap? Like,
Well, I it is interesting. I just want to point out that like to guys like Paul and myself, this idea of being able to have this conversation this is a new thing, which is awesome. And it's like super cool that we're able to talk about this stuff in like such like a open way, and it's not weird or like with it's just accepted generally now, where we're able to talk about this, which I think plays into how Paul was unsure how to answer. And because like this isn't, we've been doing this for a couple decades already, so like we're already kind of like entrenched in the thing, and like it's new to us too, to have to think about, to even put a label on it,
Right.
So so like to what Paul's saying, right? You have your work week, and that is that is what it is. You sometimes 5 shows or so, and then you get a couple of days off, and that cycle's tough, just in general, because people do other things too, but just the natural drugs that are happening of adrenaline and the excitement, you can get the excitement of being in this crew and in this thing, and you roll into town, and it's like, there's a whole thing to it that is constantly just like tickling your excitement, and then then you have 2 days off, and it's like, okay, well now, Paul's gonna change a shitty diaper. That's reality is gonna just be a pile of poop in his hand. Like that's a whole different reality now. And I think there's this up and down. When I was younger and pre JRAD days, where I'd go on the road for 5 days, and I'd come home and I'd be a plumber or a mechanic at a bowling alley. Like to go from like this thing where you're surrounded by excitement and interesting people and interesting things and interesting places, and then all of a sudden you're just back in a thing where you're handing your boss a fucking wrench, and you're just, oh, nobody here gives a crap about who I am. It's just, that's its own thing, and I think you just kind of get used to it, and and like Paul said, it's like it's you embrace the differences of it. It's like, we're, especially in our scene, we're all improvisers. I think that I like that stuff. I love it, actually. I don't like the feeling of feeling tired and gross and uninspired, but what I do enjoy is the variety of it, because it's going to make every night a different thing. Like there's no there's no way you can play the same way on a Tuesday as you are on a Saturday, right? And it's just not a thing that's going to happen. But that's kind of what's awesome, and that's the thing that hopefully something new is going to happen and different that you wouldn't have done because maybe your head is half up your ass, or because you're just missing home, or whatever the reasons are. Something new happens, and then that makes somebody else in the band do something new, and it's like, oh my, whoa, and all of a sudden, the happy accidents that are byproducts of these things. I haven't really spoken about burnout. I feel like I'm just talking about Paul's stuff. I'm sorry.
No.
As far as like actual burnout though, on the road, I just take time to myself as much as I can. And that's the stuff that I think is, for me, that's what's important. I'm very lucky with JRAD. We've all been in bands our whole lives prior to being in this thing, so we've all seen this job kick people's asses up and down the street. We've all seen it, the best of it and the worst of it. So when we're together, we just know to give each other a wide berth, you know? And it's like, hey, you know, so-and-so is just been in their bunk all day. Well, that's okay. You know, that's not my problem. You know, that's not an affront to me, you know? And just like, if I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to hang in a certain room backstage all day and just practice by myself. It's like, nobody, you know, no one takes offense to it. You know, it's like, everybody just respects each other and gives each other that kind of space. And, you know, I think that's just like one of the more important things to avoid, you know, that kind of thing of just like, don't judge your bandmates, and, you know, hopefully they're not judging you. Of just, it's not all, you know, it doesn't always have to be, we're all hanging out all the time and stuff. And that's just kind of what I use to avoid it. And it's really worked. This is like a newer thing. I like did a lot of self-work during COVID. So like, since I've been back to work, I've really been focusing on that, on making sure I take time for myself. And it's been great, honestly, you know, like, but go with Ghostlight and with JRAD, it's just been nice. You know, like I come home and I'm tired from the excitement, and I'm tired from the, you know, the emotional crashing of it, but I don't feel burnout on the people that I'm with, and I don't feel burnout on the actual job. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, I love that point of giving each other grace on the road, and just kind of letting each other do their own thing, and at least like just having that be the standard of like, this is not about you, this is for me. I think that that's so important. And also that these are new conversations that we're having, you know, this is the kind of the first time for a lot of people that we're even talking about and admitting these feelings. So I think that that's super important too. Suzanne, we're talking about burnout, but can you tell us a little bit more, like what actually is burnout? What are the warning signs of someone experiencing burnout?
Sure. I mean, you know, it looks different for everyone. As a mindset coach and being in the music industry now 20 years, I mean, all the clients that I've worked with, it appears differently in all of them, but I've certainly experienced burnout working at the major labels, like, whew. But I would say, you know, the biggest warning signs is just not feeling like yourself. And, you know, to both points that were made earlier, you know, you guys have been on the road for so long. So not feeling like yourself can sometimes then become your new baseline. And then it's just like, okay, where do I go from here? But I think, you know, being on edge, and not necessarily always being angry, but maybe feeling like you're about to cry. Every decision feeling like it's got the weight of the world on it, or every decision just feeling like, you know, the thought of like, what am I going to have for lunch is just like a puzzle that you can't figure out. Trouble sleeping, or trouble waking up, and just feeling like, you know, I can't believe it's another day. I got to go through all this again. Changes in your appetite, and also just, you know, loss of memory. And I don't say that like kind of flippantly. I mean, like really not understanding like what you just did. You know, obviously through the pandemic, we all kind of like forget what day it is and like what's going on. But you know, I like to kind of review my day with myself at the end of every day, just kind of like go through my head and like be like, okay, here's where I am. Like I check my plan. I'm a big planner, and I'm like, okay, here's where I'm at with everything. Here's what I have to do tomorrow. And I know it's a big sign of burnout when I'm like, okay, wait, what did I even do today? And I know I didn't stop moving. I know I was busy. You know, we like to wear busy as like a badge of honor in this industry. And it doesn't necessarily mean we're being healthy or productive towards our goals. But, you know, I'm so busy. And then when we can't really name like the top 1 to 3 things we did that day, you're burnt out.
Mm. I'm going to jump in, Suzanne. If you have any tips that you give to people on burnout, it sounds like there's a lot of things that people have to recognize, but if there are any ideas of little things that people can do or change.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I always say productivity is personal, and that really, burnout is under that, because we burn out from how productive we're trying to be, but it's personal for everybody. But I would definitely say, a lot of it's been mentioned here today already, which is take time for yourself, slow down. For me, it's like, I'm working on a book. It's been like 3 years I've been working on this book, but it's working on a book called Hitting Pause, because that's really like the biggest thing. I mean, all the clients I've worked with, if I could find like one common thread, myself included, is that we're afraid to hit pause, because we think of pause as quitting. It's not quitting. You're just pausing, you're slowing down. And I think, it's very difficult for us to slow down. Tommy mentioned like seeing that leash, you get that creative inspiration. And no matter how burnt out you are, you're like, this instinct of what if I never get this back? What if this is like my next greatest song? I got to do it. And we have to weigh that with, well, how burnt out am I really? So really just hitting pause for a minute. It doesn't mean you take months off and, you have to give up everything. I mean, 10 minutes to just like hit pause for a second, ignore your phone, ignore the emails, ignore people chirping at you and trying to get at you, and just breathe deep and like take a few really deep breaths and let them out, and just ask yourself, like close your eyes and be like, what do I need? A lot of us are empaths, and a lot of us are, we're service providers. When you're creating music for people, you're a service provider. You're providing them with a gift. And so it's instinctual that we're just giving. And we don't take a moment to ask ourselves, well, what do I need? And so your body knows it. Your body knows more than you think it knows. It's going to know if you're hungry. It's going to know if you need to go to sleep. It's going to know if you need to just say no. No is a full sentence. and you don't have to give people reasons. You don't have to try to explain to them that you're tired, or that show took a lot out of you, or that song you sang was like really emotionally draining and you just need a second. You don't have to explain any of that. You just take it. And, taking those few moments to check in with your body, what do I need? And then really challenging yourself. I always say like these devices have a good way of providing false urgency. We say to ourselves like, oh, I hear, it's like Pavlov's dog, to like what Tommy was saying with the leash. It's like, oh, I hear that noise. I'm needed, and I'm needed now. And again, wearing busy as a badge of honor, it's like, oh, I'm needed. So, my life is so busy. I have so much to do. I'm so important. We might not think that's what we're thinking, but it is on a subconscious level. It's how important am I? I am needed. People need me to respond. They're not waiting for me. Think back to, I remember the 90s. We got along just fine. We couldn't be in touch 24/7. So, challenging ourselves to say, I'm not answering any emails right now. I'm not talking to people right now. I'm not getting back to people's messages. I'm not checking social media. I'm just going to be. And you can meditate, tap, journal, take a bubble bath, get a massage. Like there's tons of different things you can do, but that's really personal to each person. But I think across the board, just slowing down and hitting pause is something we can all benefit from.
This feels so liberating to hear all of this, especially, just in an industry where none of that was and has been the norm. It's really, I think, a very exciting time in the industry that these conversations are finally being had. They're being normalized. Because that resonates with me so much, like wearing busy as a badge of honor. I mean, that's truly me to a T, because it's what we've been taught and conditioned to as a society, but also in this industry, especially if you're a smaller artist, like you really can't afford to lose momentum a lot of the time. And so it creates this maybe false urgency that you constantly have to be working and producing and all of this. And it's definitely exhausting.
If I can add just one thing to that point, Tara. So, Paul and Tommy were giving really good examples of, you know, as you said, just being in this industry for so long, you never really thought, am I burnt out? Or like, you know, do I need to change how I'm approaching this, or do I need a break? Because, you know, and Terry, you were saying, you know, being conditioned to wear that badge of honor of being busy. You know, I feel like I grew up in this industry and it was, you know, how bad do you want it? You know, if you want to complain, somebody else can take your spot right now. Like, how bad do you want it? And, you know, one of the stories I share with my clients all the time is, you know, I started in this industry at 18, working at the major labels. I had my own office at 20. I was the youngest person at this major label. And I was like, oh my God, this was my dream since I was a little kid. But, you know, I'm not a performer. My dream was the major labels. And to be there, I was just so, you know, excited. I was burnt out in 10 months. I mean, to the point where I was put into therapy, and my therapist and my mother intervened to get me to leave that job because I quit 5 times and I kept showing up the next day because I would quit. And then my boss would say, well, I mean, if that's what you want, I mean, because we have people downstairs begging to take this job. I was making $25,000 a year, and it was, you know, they're lining up around the block to take this job. So, I mean, if you don't really want to work in this industry, I mean, maybe you're not made for it. You know, maybe it's just not for you. And okay, see you tomorrow. And I was working 16, 17-hour days with 2 to 3 hours of sleep each night. And I just kept going and kept going. And it took me 5 times to finally be like, no, something's not right here. And just because this is how this label is run does not mean that this is my end all be all in this industry. And I think we are conditioned to be like, how badly do you want this? And you know what, if you don't really want this, you know, you just don't have what it takes. And I think we are starting to learn over these last few years, these conversations are getting easier to have. So thank you for having this workshop.
I was going to follow up and ask, like, if you kind of give into the burnout, like we're saying, you know, just not really even realizing that you're falling into it or that it's happening. Are there any like physical or what kind of things can kind of show up, I guess? Like, what can you see in a person, or I guess, yeah, what can happen to you if you're experiencing burnout and not taking care of yourself?
I mean, definitely sickness for sure. I mean, I know for myself, I manage a chronic illness now, but even before I got the chronic illness, I had burnout as soon as I left that label. And it was just, you know, complete. I mean, you lose your color, you're getting sick when it's not even like the flu season, and, you know, just constantly, you know, falling ill. I've witnessed many people reach the point of burnout where they're hospitalized, dehydrated, substance abuse, you know, just self-medicating to try to just get through the next day instead of realizing they just need to take a moment or take a mental health day to just regroup. And I think also the instinct to push forward when things feel like out of our control, when we push forward, it actually takes us much longer to survive the burnout or to come back around from it. Where if we just paused for like a few moments or a day, you're actually going to come back from that burnout a lot faster. So it's really physical health, mental health. You know, your anxiety and depression can skyrocket when you're burnt out. If you are dealing with a mental illness, whether you're on medication or not, it will greatly get exacerbated when you've hit burnout. And really just troubles in your relationships. Again, like everything gets magnified when we're burnt out. So a fight can feel like the end of the world. A wrong decision can put you into a spiral of how horrible you are or untalented you are. So really just everything getting exacerbated and your body starting to shut down on you are the really big ones.
I mean, that's wild that it can manifest into so many physical along with mental elements to it. It's all resonating. Everything you're saying as an artist, I'm like, oh yeah, that's happened.
Definitely. Does anyone have a question? I mean, I don't know if we want to open up a little bit and see if people want to throw in questions in the chat, or we could also raise. I'm not sure. I'm new to webinar, but
Very
If any,
But if anyone, I definitely throw a question in the chat for Paul, Tom, or Suzanne. Or if you have, if anything resonated with you all.
I was gonna follow up with some points that were made. I'm curious about after Tom multiple times mentioning that, the place that we're in is a position of privilege, and the burnout feeling isn't new for me. I remember being on tour in the beginning all along, and when we were really fighting to make it, every time we'd have a day off, I would question my purpose and be like, I need to just go home. And this is ridiculous. We didn't make any money last night. And that feeling has kind of never gone away. It astounds me. Every time we have a day off that I really need, I find myself in a hotel room resting, which I really need, being like, what am I doing out here? Just sitting in this hotel. Who am I? Why do I do this? We should be playing a show. I should go home. But you made a comment about a false sense of urgency. And I don't know that it is false. Like maybe I'm naive to the solution here, or that you mentioned pressing pause. And I don't know that if I look back at those days that I could have, I don't know what the, what am I looking for here? There's a tangible solution that eludes me. Like when I was a younger artist, not making enough money, like, was I supposed to schedule less shows? So I didn't feel that way. Like, I don't know. And I don't know if there's people like that watching right now who are musicians and tour and go out there and play 6 shows and barely scrape up enough money to pay rent.
Right.
I don't know how to take the pressure off that urgency, or if there is a practical solution that I could offer. One thing I saw some friends of mine do in the past couple of years, Little Smokies, is a couple of those guys like gave up their houses and they just would like Airbnb between tours, so they didn't have to worry about like paying rent on a place they didn't live in. And then that's not the solution to this thing, but I guess I'm sort of like, I'm reaching for some tangible advice to give someone who's not in a position like me, who can just sit in Southern California for 3 days between shows and eat pizza, and sleep. I look back and I don't know that I would be here if I didn't push as hard as I did. Like you said, you worked those 17, 18-hour days, and we drove ourselves. I'm the privilege of that I can even lay in my bunk while we commute now. I used to have to get up on 2 hours of sleep and drive 8 hours, questionably sober a lot of times, like the next morning, like put my bandmates' lives in danger. But there was the only choice to make it to the next gig. And if we didn't play that gig, we couldn't play the festival that summer. And if we didn't play the festival, then we couldn't play the venue again. And I guess I'm asking a question to us. Is there some tangible advice for Tom's got something? Become a plumber.
Well, no, I mean, this is I'm thinking the same things, bud, of like, this is a very like, and that's why I was bringing up like the privilege part of it. It's like, I think what it comes down to is, well, what's the goal? And I think there is, I think there is something to, if your priority is being famous or being, I got a talking to once by an elder statesman in this industry, and I was in my early 20s and I was on the verge of quitting, and he was just like, listen, man, ironically he was my age now then, and he was just like, listen, man, I'm not like super famous, but I have a house that I like, and I have a band that I love, and I get to wake up and play music every day. If you need the party and you need the fame, you need the chicks and like all the stuff, you're probably right. You should go home and do something else, go back to school or whatever. But if just waking up and getting to play if that's the goal, and if that's enough, well, then you're good, and you do the things, you buy the ticket, you take the ride, so when Paul and I were young, we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have the pressures, the social pressures that come with, like there wasn't people just being famous because they were famous. You know what I mean? Like it was you were a thing because you did shit, and I think you can't necessarily have your cake and eat it too. You can't not do the work and get the result, but you also can't necessarily get the result from doing the work and then complain about it. I think it's like a weird catch-22 where we all find ourselves. It's like, if the Beatles, took a day, you know what I mean? Like it wouldn't be a thing. Like I highly suggest anybody that does what we do to watch the Ron Howard documentary on the Beatles on their early days, 8 days a week. The reason they're who they are and why they had the impact on the world that they did was simply because they worked harder than everybody else. They were just better at it. And, and that's like that's a shitty reality that you have to swallow, of like, okay, well, maybe I'm not, I'm never going to be John Lennon because I can't do that, so, I just think you have to look at the whole picture,
Yeah. To kind of address what Paul was saying and also what Tommy added to, because I hear this constantly from my clients, and I resonate with a lot of it, is this, we instinctively don't want to trust that there are other ways because we're so entrenched and live, breathe, and eat that this is the way. There is no other way. So when Paul says, well, I think back and I don't know if it was false urgency, everything was just urgent. A lot of it is just programming. Like a lot of our bodies are so conditioned to see, mental priming is very powerful. And so if we are conditioned to look through a lens of like, there is no other way, or this is just part of of how it goes, or this is a piece of it, and that's how we see everything through that lens, then that is how it's going to be. And for the first 10 years of my career, nobody was going to tell me differently. And it wasn't until I got a chronic illness that was the only thing that forced me to really see things through another lens, because a lot of this all comes down to trust. A lot of, taking care of ourselves and finding little ways to pause. Doesn't have to be a day or a week or a month. It could be 10 minutes to pause, or an hour, alone to regroup, or an hour with a loved one or a friend to get, engaged in good, helpful conversation, or having a hug with somebody just to like have that, moment. There are little things that we can do in our days to try to heal that burnout. Or, you can never make up sleep. That doesn't happen. We can't make up sleep. If we don't get sleep, we don't get it. And we just have to try to get it, the next night or the next afternoon, depending on, our time schedule. But I think a lot of it is challenging ourselves to look at something and say, like, okay, for instance, I needed to play that other gig to get to the festival. So then it becomes, okay, is this, when we think big picture sustainability, is this something I just have to bite down, head down, and deal with and pray I get to the end of so I could play this festival? Or is this a lifestyle that I'm just going to sign on for? And so I still pull all-nighters. I just pulled one the other night, but I used to pull all-nighters 4 to 5 times a week because that was just my lifestyle until it wasn't able to be. And so, I look back, and when I built my business, and I built it full time in 6 months, working 4 hours a day, the workaholic in me was like, there's no way that's possible. But Parkinson's law actually shows us that the less time we give ourselves, the work can still get done. And we just, there's little things, whether it's thoughts, whether it's tasks that don't actually need to be done right now, or whether it's, talking with people and networking with people that really aren't serving our main goal right now. We fill our days with so much stuff that if we really had somebody standing next to us listing all the stuff that we've done because we're so busy. There are always ways to find a little time to breathe, to hit pause, to put that off till later. The gig, maybe not, and the travel time, maybe not. And I pray that everyone, all of you touring, please try your best to, make driving schedules for multiple people to take turns driving, or, find the safest ways, because so many accidents, so many people get hurt. They say truck drivers and touring musicians are the two biggest for falling asleep at the wheel or drunk driving, or driving while on coke. That's all. Those three things are the biggest things, because truck drivers and touring musicians don't often feel like they have a choice. And I think Paul and Tommy are right. A lot of this is a privilege in terms of being able to take extended breaks, or being able to offload certain tasks or responsibilities to somebody else, or to hire somebody, for help. But I think no matter who we are in control of making that choice and saying, you know what, I'm taking 10 minutes to step away, or I'm taking 10 minutes to not get back to you right now, or to, it's all about giving ourselves permission to put ourselves first. And it doesn't feel good right away. It took me years of having a chronic illness to finally give in and say, okay, I have to change my lifestyle. Like it has to be different. And so when we're forced to make those changes, we find different ways to cut corners and to find that extra time when we have to. And I think, looking back, I look back at how I was at the major labels, and I can't even believe my lifestyle back then. It just feels so foreign to me now, but there was no way you were going to tell me differently back then. And so it's very hard to, in hindsight, see where the choices would have been different, or how we would go about something differently. But when it's in front of us, we do have that choice to say, okay, really challenge us right now at this second. Does this have to be done, or can I take 10 minutes? Maybe it does have to be done right now, but does everything have to be done right now? Can I challenge the next thing, and then the next thing? And I think it's all about just being intentional with our choices every step of the way. Being self-aware of the choices we're making, I think, is really important.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for their insight on this, for tips, Suzanne, for Paul and Tom, for just being so vulnerable with us and being so honest and open. It truly, for myself, and I'm hoping for all of the attendees here, was so refreshing to hear other artists say, this is exhausting, but also for Suzanne to give us tips on actual ways to, kind of unlearn what we've been conditioned to learn, and, hopefully change the way that we treat ourselves on tour, on and off the road, I think is really important. I also want to let folks know that everything that Suzanne has said, we're going to make some graphics for social media. We're going to provide some resources on Backline's website, because it's really important for us. We've just given you a lot of information. We've talked a lot, but we want to make sure that we have actual tangible resources for you if needed. So be on the lookout for that later on this week. I think it's a good time to wrap up the workshop, but if anyone else has anything they'd like to end with, or chime in, or ask a question, please feel free to do so. But again, thank you so much, Paul, Tom, Suzanne, for being here. This truly was very liberating and refreshing to be a part of.
Thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate part of the conversation.
Love it. Thanks.
Thank you also.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Paul and Tommy, because artists need people like you so much to be open and honest about the good, bad, and the ugly as artists. It was really just I'm not a performer, and I was just enthralled with just listening to you share, and thank you for that. We need more of that.
I appreciate your insight. I really liked a lot of what you just said. I'm gonna go see if I can put some of it to practice, write some songs
Bye, you guys. Thank
quickly.
you.
Bye,
Thank you all so much.
everybody. Thanks.
See you next
Bye.
time.